Agent Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And Dean, what are we doing here today?
Well, it's another night to talk about rules as written. It seems like people were wanting these things, thanks to one of our members on the server, Grazen. Big shout out. Thanks for a great topic. So tonight we're going to talk about some rules as written for vehicular combat. And Anthony, get us set up and let us get going.
Yeah, first and foremost, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video on YouTube if you can. We'll greatly appreciate it. We're trying to get our counts up there. So thank you for that ahead of time. And in this episode, we're going to go over the rules as written for all vehicle interactions for movement. We'll talk about flavoring and, of course, combat in the Cypher system. We're going to look at the rules in the CSR and the Stars of Fire, those two separate books, because I think it's important. They both have different variations of vehicle combat rules. So I think it makes sense for us to touch on both of them. And, we'll try to give our opinions on what we think works, what doesn't work. Are there any house rules that we commonly use in our games? So let's get started. First, to start off with the Cypher System revised version of the vehicle rules. So, like always, we like to read the definition first. So, Al, you want to take us away?
Sure. So you can find those rules on page 232 of the Cypher System Revised book. And it goes as follows. So first it talks about vehicular movement. So vehicles move just like creatures. Each has a movement rate which indicates how far it can move and around. Most vehicles require a driver, and when moving, they usually require that the driver spends every action controlling the movement. This is a routine task that rarely requires a roll. Any round not spent driving the vehicle hinders the task in the next round and precludes any change in speed or direction. In other words, driving down the road normally is a difficulty 0 task. Spending an action to retrieve a backpack from the back seat means that in the following round, the driver must attempt a difficulty 1 task. If they instead use their action to pull a handgun from the backpack, in the next round, difficulty to drive will be 2, and so on. Failure results are based on the situation, but might involve a collision or something similar. In a vehicular chase, drivers attempt speed actions just like in a regular chase, but the task may be based on either the level of the driver, modified by the level and movement rate of the vehicle, or on the level of the vehicle, modified by the level of the driver. So if a PC driving a typical car is chasing a level 3 NPC driving a level 5 sports car, the PC would make 3 chase rolls with a difficulty of 5. If the PC's car is a souped-up custom vehicle, it might grant the PC an asset in the chase. If the PC is not in a car at all, but riding a bicycle, it might hinder the chase rolls by 2 or 3 steps, or the GM might simply rule that it's impossible. Then it moves on to vehicular combat. Much of the time, a fight between foes in cars, boats, or other vehicles is just like any other combat situation. The combatants probably have cover and are moving fast. Attacks to disable a vehicle or a portion of it are based on the level of vehicle. If the vehicle is an armored car or tank, all attacks are likely aimed at the vehicle, which has a level and probably an appropriate armor rating, not unlike a creature. The only time this isn't true is with battles where only vehicles and not characters are involved. Thus, if the PCs are in a shootout with bank robbers and both groups are in cars, use the standard rules. However, battles between starships of various kinds, from gigantic capital ships to single pilot fighters, are a frequent occurrence in far future science fiction settings. A submarine battle between 2 deep-sea craft could be quite exciting. Characters in a modern-day game might find themselves in a tank fight. If PCs are involved in combat, which they are entirely enclosed in vehicles so that it's not really the characters fighting but the vehicles, use the following quick and easy guidelines. On this scale, combat between vehicles isn't like traditional combat. Don't worry about health, armor, or anything like that. Instead, just compare the levels of the vehicles involved. If the PC's vehicle has the higher level, the difference in level is how many steps the PC's attack and defense rolls are eased. If the PC's vehicle has a lower level, their rolls are hindered. If the levels are the same, there is no modification. These attack and defense rolls are modified by skill and effort as usual. Some vehicles also have superior weapons, which ease the attack. since there is no damage amount to worry about. But this circumstance is probably uncommon in this abstract system and should not affect the difficulty by more than maybe 1 or 2 steps. Further, if 2 vehicles coordinate their attack against 1 vehicle, the attack is eased. If 3 or more vehicles coordinate, the attack is eased by 2 steps. The attacker must try to target a specific system on or portion of an enemy vehicle. This hinders the attack based on the system or portion targeted. That's a lot of modifications, but it's not really that hard. Let's look at an example of a space battle. A PC in a small level 2 fighter attacks a level 4 frigate. Since the frigate is level 4, the difficulty of the attack starts at level 4. But the attacking craft is weaker than the defender, so the attack is hindered equal to the difference in their levels, which is 2. The fighter pilot must make a difficulty 6 attack on the frigate. However, the fighter is trying to swoop in and damage the frigate's drive, which hinders the attack by another 3 steps for a total difficulty of 9. If the fighter pilot is trained in space combat, they reduce the difficulty to 8, but it's still impossible without help. So let's say 2 other PCs, also in level 2 fighters, join in and coordinate their attack. 3 ships coordinating an attack on 1 target eases the task by 2 steps, resulting in a final difficulty of 6. Since the attacking PC would be wise to use effort, then the frigate retaliate. Oh, one second, I think I skipped the sentence. Still, the attacking PC would be wise to use effort to lower the task even further. Then the frigate retaliates, and the PC needs to make a defense roll. The level difference between the ships, 2, means the PC's defense is hindered by 2 steps. So the difficulty of the PC's defense roll starts out at 6. But the frigate tries to take out the fighter's weapons, hindering their attack, easing the PC's defense by 2 steps. Thus, the PC needs to succeed at a difficulty 4 task or lose their main weapon systems. It's important to remember that a failed attack doesn't always mean a miss. The target ship might rock and reel from a hit, but the bulk of the damage was absorbed by the shields, so there's no significant damage. This bare-bones system should allow the GM and players to flesh out exciting encounters involving the whole group. For example, perhaps while one PC pilots the ship, another mans the guns, and another frantically attempts to repair the damage to the maneuvering thrusters before they crash into the space station they're trying to defend. And that's the end of it. You're muted.
It's pretty straightforward. I think before we go into vehicle combat, let's just talk about like the basic vehicle rules first. Because I think a lot of this comes up a more frequent, like chase scenes, car chase scenes, horseback chase scenes, anything that's you're mounted or what you call it, it's not just you running, you know what I mean, will apply to this. So let's just break down the original vehicle rules. So, I think that it's worth taking in mind that Cypher system tends to be cinematic over simulationist. So, if a roll isn't required to operate a vehicle, then you shouldn't make them roll. If there's nothing happening outside of I'm driving this car and I have a driving skill, there should be no roll required, right? But if you're attempting to do actions at the same time while, what you call it, driving a vehicle or riding a horse, that's when you make them make a roll. And the rule is pretty straightforward. If it's a simple task, you make them a difficulty 1 or 2 tasks. If it's something more strenuous, then you could go to the chart and as like with every other task resolution that you look at the chart. If this is really difficult, it'll be a difficult 3 roll, difficult 4 roll, depending on the action they're taking while at the same time operating this vehicle.
Yeah, again, it's pretty straightforward. It's nice and easy. What I really like is how they discuss next further down is the chase rules, where it's broken down into three rolls, and it's just speed actions. And again, this is very straightforward stuff, and it takes into account of the level of the vehicle. Should it be a sports car, a horse, or whatever have you, and you just roll against the difficulty level of the vehicle you're riding, which again makes sense. You try to control this vehicle that's at this level.
You roll against the difficulty vehicle you're riding, but you also subtract the vehicle that you're in. So,
right.
So it's
If you're chasing, like they said, if you're chasing a level 5 vehicle, you're in a level 3 vehicle or on a bike or whatever, it becomes more difficult
yeah,
to follow that level 5 vehicle.
yeah.
Now, it can be modified. Again, these are just simplistic ideas that, we use that, well, I know I've used, if the person,
No, I was gonna say, Dean, explain out the rule. Like, so it's basically if you're in a level 5 vehicle and you're in a level 2 vehicle, it now becomes a difficulty 8 task because
correct.
you subtract the difference and then you add it on to the task number that you're rolling against.
Right.
But
Well,
then
the difficulty, it will be whatever the difficulty you set. And it's,
whatever the difference is becomes the
right, whatever
difficulty.
difficulty you set plus the difference between the two
Yeah.
levels of the vehicles.
Oh,
But
you're not setting the difficulty. The difficulty is always the opposing vehicle's number. So it's if it's a level 5 vehicle, the base difficulty is always level 5. Then you go and go. That's the base number. You're not setting it. It's given to you. The vehicle's a level 5 vehicle. That's the base number. Then whatever vehicle you're in, right? You should either if it's higher or lower, it doesn't matter. Whatever the difference is, you either raise the difficulty or lower it according to the vehicle you're in.
Yep.
Hmm.
Sounds about right. And again, it's pretty easy. If let's say you're in a 2, chasing a 5, it's normally a 5, but the difference makes it 8 because the difference is 3.
I think some people get a little thrown off by the math. You know what I mean? Because Cypher isn't really a math heavy.
well, in this particular situation, Anthony, we're both wrong. You don't add anything. It says if you're driving, so if the PC is driving a typical vehicle chasing a level 3 NPC, an NPC driving a level 5 vehicle, you'd make 3 rolls versus 5. If the PC car is souped
Oh,
up,
that's the combat rules. You're right.
no,
Dave.
this is chase. This is
No.
No.
What Anthony was describing was the combat rules, not the chase rules.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's what I was talking about. Chase. That's what I was saying. So you
Dean
know.
is absolutely correct in that case.
Yes.
Sorry for the
the confusion.
Yep. Dean
So
is right.
if you're chasing a level 5 car, you only roll to the level 5 of that car that you're chasing.
Right, and then it's modified based. It says, like it says,
If you have a souped
if
up
the
car,
PC's not in the car but riding a bike, it might be hindered even more. 2 or 3 steps, so on and so forth. That's where those hindrances come in. Rules as written.
And you can still apply assets on your roll.
Right.
Yeah. And the both the CSR and the more so the Stars of Fire, which we'll get to later in this video, give you a pretty extensive list of the ratings of each vehicle.
yes.
Exactly.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now when we move into combat is where it becomes a little bit more, if you would say math heavy, convoluted, whatever the case may be. Even though the rules are straightforward, it can become a bit of a math problem, if you will. But it makes perfect sense the way they have it set up and for what they're going for. The reason why I think they use.
So Dean, go over the rule again first. So before we start doing the actual.
All right. So for example, it says a fighter pilot. Let's see. It says right here, a PC in a small level 2 fighter attacks a level 4 frigate. Since the frigate is level 4, the difficulty of attack starts at 4. But the attacking craft is weaker than the defender, so the attack is hindered equal to the difference of the levels. That's 2. So the fighter pilot must make a difficulty 6 attack on the frigate. However, the fighter is trying to swoop in and damage the frigate's drive, which hinders it by another 3 steps, for a total of 9 difficulty. Now, if the fighter pilot is trained in space combat, they reduce the difficulty to 8, which is still an impossible task without help. So let's say there are 2 other PCs in level 2 fighters and they join in and coordinate, then all 3 ships, coordinate an attack on one target can ease it by 2 steps, resulting in a final difficulty of 6. Still, the attacking PC is wise to use effort. So, straightforward, in most cases, when you're thinking about it, you're going, oh my God, why is it harder to hit something bigger than you? And I don't think that, I think that it's more just a representation, not so much that it's harder to hit, but it's harder for you to damage it because it's a bigger, more powerful vehicle. And I think that's the representation that they're giving when they're the reason why the difficulty becomes so much harder to hit.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that works. Like, it's not necessarily it works. It's basically the level of the ship, not necessarily that it's bigger, because you could have a high level ship that's a suit the Millennium Falcon. You know what I mean? Might be
Well, it's
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. But the Millennium Falcon is not a good example because the Millennium Falcon is an old junker. It's the pilot that's doing the Millennium Falcon. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's the level. Like,
Right.
I want to get into the actual rule instead of like basically the actual rule is whatever the level of the ship that's being attacked or is doing attack, or whatever the NPC ship is, you take that as the base roll to hit, right? Then it's like what I said earlier. Then you take the level of your ship, whatever the difference is, whether it's higher or lower, you either hinder your roll or you give yourself additional assets with the difference in number, and that's how you come up with what you have to roll against. I think that a lot of times the confusion is what's the target number I got to roll against, right? And I think that's the reason why we were requested to make this video.
Again, like I said, I didn't agree. I disagree with you. I mean, I wasn't disagreeing with you. I was saying that that's exactly what it is. Higher level, more difficult to hit. The way we're playing it is more difficult to hit. I'm saying that the higher level is not necessarily that it's harder to hit, but it's harder to damage.
Yes.
And that's more of a representation of how they're doing it, making it harder for you to hit it. That way, it's that much harder for you to damage. Then of course we're going to take into account that a larger vehicle is going to have more armor and so on and so forth.
Yes.
That's what I was saying.
So, I mean, the best way to view it as a GM and as a player is that view vehicles almost the same way you would view NPC stat blocks.
Mm-hmm.
The vehicle is going to have armor. The vehicle is going to have a certain amount of damage it could soak. The vehicle is going to have a target number. So when someone is in, and it doesn't even have to be spaceships, is not a good example. We could just use, like two tanks fighting each other.
A tank versus a Humvee.
Yes.
You got a tank, you got a Humvee with a 50 cal, 50 cal machine gun on the back of it, and you got a tank. The tank is going to be, just say arbitrarily, a level 6 vehicle, and the Humvee is a level 4 vehicle. Once again, it's a 2-level disparage. And, it's going to be harder for that Humvee to damage that tank. So instead of, going through lots of different math to figure out how much damage or how much depletion or so on and so forth, they're just making it harder for the actual hit to take place.
Yeah, I think the confusion lies when someone reads this rule which happens a lot in the Cypher system. It's the hindered, it's hindered additionally, another 2 steps, or hindered additionally another 3 steps. When you read it, it doesn't come across as like easy reading, and
Right.
it doesn't help that they give an example that is, it's hindered by 3 steps. But then you bring in the ship, which gives you an asset. Like, I think it would have been better if they would have had it a smaller number,
Well,
in the explanation.
Either a smaller number for the explanation, or this is the one time I would have to say Eric Frankhouse is right. If they put it on like a chart where they would have, vehicle X versus vehicle, Y, and result Z, you could just kind of see it in pieces. Because when you're reading it, it can jumble together.
But to simplify things, you always roll against the NPC vehicle, like that target number, just to restate it, just to simplify it. So whatever the target number is of the vehicle, then you take your vehicle target, whatever vehicle you're driving, whatever the number, the rating number of that vehicle is, and you subtract it. If it comes up of a positive or negative number, whatever it is, if it's negative, then those are the steps that you raise the target number of the NPC's vehicle, and that's your target number to hit. And if it's positive, you lower the target number of the vehicle, your target number to hit, and you rock like that. It's as simple as that. It sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is.
So one thing I think they could have done with the definition, and I see what they were doing, why it's so long like this, is also wanted to take into account an explanation for cooperative actions, like lowering it with help. Yeah. So what they should have done to maybe like ease reading a bit was that just have two examples. And the first example is a small number one, so they get the basics of how it works, and then a second example that was more like this higher number that would require the help, and then they break it down even further. Yeah. Because then they have the basic idea of, just comparing the two numbers and then rolling it out as opposed to just a single scenario of 1-on-1 or whatever. And then once they have that basic concept grasped, they can move on to the larger, more, and honestly, having help makes it a little more complicated as far as the math goes. So I can see where, again, the confusion might have lied with them including that as part of the basic explanation of it. Again, it could have been broken up into two.
Yeah, I mean, Stars of Fire is going to go a little more in depth. But this rule right here could apply to any vehicles, which I really like the Stars of Fire version, but in a quick, like a quick one-shot game, this is the rule I'm using.
Yes.
It's the easiest, it's fast, and it applies to anything. You can apply it to mechs. Like Dean said, you can apply it to tanks. You can apply it to people trying to ram each other with bicycles. Like, this is the go-to vehicle combat.
Well, it's the original. Yeah. Stars of Fire took it a step further because of what Stars of Fire is all about. Yeah. I mean, it is about, outer space and taking things to another level. And people talk about vehicle combat. So did you guys make any changes or make any house rules for your vehicle combat before we go into the next one?
To be honest, when I ran Star Wars and stuff, what I basically did was I assigned the target number without doing this math beforehand, and then the way I made it harder to hit was the armor that the ship had, because it was just quicker that way,
Right.
So then I didn't necessarily subtract whatever the player's vehicle was. I just said, hey, look, this is the target number you're in, and this is the target number you need to hit. Do you have any abilities or assets or skills that's going to lower this number? And I went like that. I kind of simplified the even simple rule.
And see, for me, Al, did you do anything?
Oh no, I can chime in here real quick. I actually have not run much vehicle combat. I will just say that hasn't really come up in my games. In my games, when I have vehicles, they're usually just the transport mechanism, to be frank. I haven't run any games where it's like the main focus or even something to do. I do, I have story ideas where it would come into play, but as of right now, I haven't really had any practical in my own game type situation. So, yeah, I haven't really made any modifications or anything.
And see, for me, what I did, like for my Star Wars, and actually my Rebel sort of campaign that I was running for a while, I just made modifications on all the ships. I gave all the ships subsystems, if it would give you ease piloting, so on and so forth. And I kind of reversed it because to me, it just made more sense to be easier to hit. But you couldn't always get through a vehicle's armor and stuff like that, like Anthony was saying. So, if you're flying in a fighter, yes, it's much easier to hit a big capital ship than it is to hit another fighter. And I would do things like that, but the capital ship could ignore lots of damage if you couldn't get past his shields or get past his armor, and that's where the coordinated attacks would come in, or trying to attack subsystems and things like that. That's kind of how I handled it, and it made life a lot easier as well.
Yeah, like this rule in the revised Cypher System book, it's not too in depth. It's meant to be like this is a fast, easy resolution mechanic, and I think they in Stars of Fire and Vanita brought up a good point. Crew Stars also expanded upon it as well by Ganza Gaming. You know, it's more of an in depth. Like this is more like I'm gonna actually give you the like the subsystems of a spacecraft, and have each craft have its unique like unique specialty that it does, which affects the target number on either side on
Right.
to attack and to defend. But this is the quick and dirty. Hey, you got two ships. You want to have them fight. What's the target number of the main ship? Subtract it from what your ship is, and that's your target number. It's quick and easy. It's cinematic. You know,
Right.
it's a lot. It sounds a lot more complicated than what it actually is at the table.
And that's really it, And once again, like I said, you know, depending on how you want to run it, like and say quick and dirty,
Yeah.
with the system rules is written, and then if you wanted to go further, like what uh, Crew Von Ether saying, what Gonza Game and Cruel Stars, they used gear and so on and so forth. They expanded on it, and like what I did was I just came up with various types of ships, and each ship had its bonuses. Some ships had bonuses to armor, some had bonuses to deflection, some had bonuses to piloting, some had bonuses to targeting because they would have targeting
But
systems. So and so forth.
let me just ask a question. Did those bonuses affect the target number? Did it affect the math of the actual?
It only affected the roll. It would affect the person's roll. So if I said, let's just say it was a capital ship and you wanted to, fire on it, but you had a targeting system, that would give you it probably a level 1 targeting system that gives you an easement, one tag easement to hit a bigger vehicle because you got a targeting system to target with, or if you had maneuvering thrusters, you could use your maneuvering thrusters to dodge better. So yeah, they did affect the math like that, but it was already figured in. So like if you were the pilot and you got into the ship, it would say you have 2 assets on piloting, or you have 2 assets on fire control. So it was already there for you when you looked
So
at it.
so what was the difference between having that and just having raising the target number of the ship? You know what I mean? Like
Because
if this ship had all this cool stuff, so
it was
it's no longer a level 3 ship. It's a level 5 ship.
because for people's view, it made more sense for people's view. Because if you just keep up in the levels and no explanation of why it's a higher level ship or anything like that, then people get caught up with, well, you know, I got a fighter, I got this little tiny fighter. Why is it so easy for this big capital ship to hit me? You
Because
know,
I think that's how Vert handled it, but Vert just raised the target level. But they, in the definition of the actual vehicle, they explain why.
right,
You know,
right.
why.
And like I said, I mean, and that's literally what it is. If you got this particular ship, you got a bonus on this because of this. But you had these components, and the way I built it is just the idea that you could put these components, so this way you could build your own unique ship if you wanted to. But your ship
Um,
only had a certain number of slots to
Ken
put stuff on.
brought up a great point when he says you don't take your own level into account in the cipher rules. You don't, but that's where assets and skills. You lower the difficulty. Like if you're specialized in piloting, that would also lower the difficulty.
Right.
It's just not using your actual, your actual level. It's using what skills and abilities you have to lower the difficulty of the actual
Right.
role.
So, like I said, so it's just ways of interpreting it. And the only reason I do it, interpreting certain things, was basically for the narrative.
Mhm.
So people, just for people's view. You, Al, myself, we see Cypher System and we kind of understand those nuances. And sometimes those nuances are lost on other people,
Yeah,
until they get used to playing.
yeah, I think flavoring plays a bigger role in Cypher System than a lot
Yeah.
of other systems. And it's the idea of we're gonna make this a cinematic experience. So it's whatever is cool. We don't need a mechanical
Exactly.
or we don't need to add a mechanic to something that you could just flavor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I definitely like the fast and dirty rule for. I like the Stars of Fire version better for spaceships, but for everything else, I like this fast and dirty rule.
I like the fast and dirty rule. I think I would like it depending on what I'm doing. Because like if I was running Power Rangers, I think I might use the space combat rules as well. You know, for something like mechs, you know, mecha combat or something like that. It just depends on what I'm doing. But you're right, they both work. And because you know, in Stars of Fire, they actually reprint the original rule as well, and then they take it a step further and expand upon it. So
yeah, and they are all optional rules to answer your question, Ken.
So go on ahead, Anthony. You want to introduce us to the next section?
All right, so are we basically done with the cipher rule?
Well, I will say this one last thing before we move on, because I think we hit the nail on the head. But Ken put it succinctly, whatever that word is. I found this confusing to read, confusing to explain, and then simple once you actually do it. So yeah, that's basically the crux of it. It does seem very confusing if you're sitting down just reading it, but once you go and actually apply it, it's actually just very simple math.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you had the best idea. They should have had two explanations. They should have had the basic simple one with no assets, no abilities. Hey, this guy's in a level 3 tank, this guy's in a level 2 Humvee. This is what you have to roll against. And then had the second definition that they had in there. You know what I mean? To explain, okay, it might get a little more complicated, and now we'll explain it. But I think you're right. They should have had the simple one with no assets, no hindrances. This is what the roll target number is to roll against, and it would have been a little clearer in the definition probably.
Yep.
All right, so now we're gonna move on to the optional rules in Stars of Fire, and Bruce took the vehicle rules from the Cypher system. Bruce Cordell. Like, I'm sorry if I said it on a first name basis, like, we hanging out. Bruce Cornell from Monte Cook Games, he took the vehicle rules from the Cypher System revised rulebook and expanded upon it. He added so much to the vehicle conflict resolution mechanics with multiple optional rules. We're going to touch on two of them because we felt like those are the two most important. But, he pretty much took the Cypher System, like, vehicle rules and made it so you could play any sort of vehicle, like including mechs and all sorts of that, doing Star Trek, Star Wars, hard sci-fi, sci-fantasy, and be able to incorporate these rules because I felt that a certain crowd wanted more crunch. And let's be honest too, when you're dealing with hard sci-fi and you're dealing with, cyberpunk, sometimes that crunch is actually needed, to make you feel like you're playing in those genres. Some people might not agree, but I think I don't mind the extra crunch in those specific genres.
You make a good point, Anthony, and I just like to add to that before we get into the rule and say it this way. What I dig about it is that there's more crunch, but not more complication. It's still within the realm of how Cypher System works. So it's like he took what already existed and just expanded the thought process on it. So it's, again, like we always talk about, that simplicity and that elegance, that nuance. And that's what Bruce really did when he extended the vehicle. And there's literally what they call optional rules, extended vehicular combat, so. You want me to get into it or what?
Yeah. So,
right,
just read the extended vehicle combat rules and then we'll talk about that and then we'll get into the next one.
All right. So on page 41 of Stars of Fire, you see the extended vehicular combat rules. And it says when vehicular combat occurs, which happens whenever the PCs are completely enclosed in the vehicle, so that it is not really the characters fighting, but the vehicles. Start with the vehicular combat rules described in Cypher System Rulebook. However, if you'd like to provide the PCs with more options designed especially for spacecraft combat, use these optional rules instead, which include red line maneuvers, systems for trying extremely risky spacecraft maneuvers, bridge combat options, and more. The base combat rules have been integrated into these extended rules, so you don't need to continually cross-reference them to understand how it all works. In the extended vehicular combat, PCs on a spacecraft take actions on their turn, just like in a standard Cypher System combat encounter. Use standard initiative rules to determine when the PCs take their actions and when the enemy spacecraft takes theirs. Characters will be crewing specific spacecraft system stations described under bridge combat, and thus they could attempt a piloting maneuver to fire the ship's weapons, to scan the enemy craft for weaknesses, or to attempt some similar spacecraft operation task on their turn. Alternatively, they might be somewhere else on the ship attempting repairs, fighting off borders, attempting to open communications in order to negotiate, or taking some other action. For their part, the enemy spacecraft are likely to fire on the same systems aboard the PC spacecraft as the ones the PCs are firing on theirs. Weapons, defenses, engines, or even kill shots. The PC pilot rolls one or more defense rolls, and the enemy spacecraft faces the same modifications the PC face when targeting a particular system as described hereafter. Except those modifications ease or hinder the PC making the defense rolls, since NPC craft never roll themselves. And if any enemy ship manages to disable a system on the PC ship on an attack, PCs can attempt repair tasks to get those systems back online on their terms. The main difference between spacecraft combat and regular combat is that the difficulty of tasks that the PC attempt in relation to the enemy craft varies a lot more than in regular combat. In normal combat, a task difficulty is usually equal to the foe's level. But in spacecraft combat, a task difficulty is equal to the modified task difficulty beginning with the spacecraft's level, but moving on from there as noted hereafter. The modified difficulty always applies anything a character attempts in regard to the enemy spacecraft, whether a PC fires at an enemy ship, dodges, return fire, attempts to scan the enemy spacecraft, attempts to repair damage caused by the enemy spacecraft, and so on. It's actually similar to a normal task. For example, when a PC scans a robot, the task difficulty is usually the robot's level, but not always. Sometimes the robot's effective level is modified because of intrinsic skills or systems the robot possesses, or because of something it does, making it harder or easier for it to be scanned. In the case of spacecraft combat, modification is pretty much a given and even more variable. So variable, in fact, that a space combat status tracker is provided in the Stars Are Fired to turn potentially confusing conflicts into something as easy as looking at a marker to know what the difficulty for a particular task is. The modifiers that apply even before the PC attempts a specific combat task noted under bridge combat are as follows. So let's talk about that. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But I'll just say this real quick. Basically, what this is talking about was the idea that I had initially, and what I was talking about from before. This is kind of, a big variable on what I was doing until this book came out. And now, it's kind of a complete amalgamation of what they said here and what I was doing. So I think it's a cool rule. I think it works. What about you, Ant?
Let's dig deep into the actual rule and what are the differences between the original vehicle combat rule and the adjusted, Stars of Fire rule. I think the biggest difference is now it takes into account the actual abilities of the character themselves.
Exactly.
To either raise, or lower the difficulty of the opposing enemy ship target number.
Right. Exactly.
Where the other one is more flat rate. It's basically what your ship does, what the enemy ship does, and then you subtract the difference. This one actually takes into account what's on the ship, like the actual components on the ship, and what skills players choose to do in mid action to lower the difficulty. So it requires more rolls than the standard one roll. And I think this is more designed for big ship combat. It's more designed for, say, mech combat. It's
It could be mecha combat. I mean, it could be a ship the size of, like you said earlier, like the Millennium Falcon. You
Yeah.
know, you got the two guys in the back, you know, they're gunners. You got somebody piloting the ship. Then you got somebody else working on the subsystems, you know, basically making sure that, you know, damage control and so on and so forth. You know, you could have stations on your ship in order to facilitate everybody being involved in the vehicular combat. That's what it kind of does, you know.
I mean, what it boils down to though is if you want your combat, your ship combat to be fast, use the original rule. If you want your ship combat to be more narrative and everyone playing a role, especially if multiple people are on one ship, then you move on to these rules.
And one cool thing, again, it's not, I don't think it's really specifically mentioned in the definition here, but if you've looked at the Stars of Fire book, there's like little tables that show exactly like all the different subsystems, like how much like different actions are hindered by, like, for example, I'm looking at the PC weapon system options, right? So they'll have the targeting task of like saying they can want to disable weapons, disable defensive, so on and so forth. Like, it's all very clearly listed out. And like disabling weapons, for example, is hindered 2 steps. Like disabling the engine is 3 steps. Like, all these very specific niche situations that you would have basically found yourself asking questions about in this sort of like space combat scenario is basically listed for you here.
You definitely need those charts.
Yes.
The combat tracker, the tracker is awesome.
Yeah.
Like I said, it makes life easier because, like I was saying, when I added the subsystems, now with the subsystems already on a tracker like that, you know, it's just that quick, you know, because you already know.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need those charts, and like, I can't believe I'm not actually utter these words, but it kind of makes you want to have a GM screen. If you're improv GM, you're not gonna remember, and then you're gonna get an imbalance because in one turn you're gonna be like, hey, this hindered it twice, you know, it brought it down 2 steps, and you're not gonna remember. So you need those actual charts in front of you. That's what I mean about like certain. That's funny. I mean, yeah, I'm anti-GM screen, so it hurt me. It hurt me to the core to have to say it. But you actually do need those charts if you want to run it using this specific, you know, style of space combat.
Oh,
What I find funny. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just finding it funny because the GM screen for me was really, I never looked at it as a barrier between me and the players. It was, for me, it was always useful tools because I used the charts. That's what it was all about.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean it like that. I
know. I understand that. I understand. I'm just saying, you know, a lot of people when they say that, you know, because with Cypher, the table is open and everybody's there. So I'm just, you know, stating for my purposes, like, I'd probably still have a GM screen. Instead of having it directly in front of me, I'll have it at an angle over here, you know, for something like Stars or Fire. Because you're right, absolutely, it's great to be able to look at everything and just scan it and keep moving.
I will say this though, Anthony, just real quick, just to assuage or whatever the word is. I'm using all these words I don't know how to actually pronounce, but either way, to put your fears to rest. Again, it doesn't have to be a GM screen. Just have your tablet open next to you to these pages, and you can reference the rules right then and there. Like you have it on your phone or something. You don't actually need a GM screen, Anthony. It doesn't. We don't need that little barrier. Just have it on your phone, on your tablet.
Yeah, it's not even a GM screen. I'm just not a fan of
having to reference rules.
Having to reference. I don't mind referencing rules pre-game or post-game. I'm just not a fan of referencing rules during the game. And anything that makes me want to reference rules during the game is kind of like, you know what I mean? But I understand if you want to run a specific. Like, I honestly think if you're going to run a hard sci-fi game, you should be using these rules because you're kind of doing yourself a disservice if you're not using them.
Yeah. Oh,
Unless, 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 because you are right, unless you are going to be a person who house rules, and you be able to keep those in your head. You know, if you're going
No,
to say,
but that's the problem. The problem with complicated. The problem I have. This is we going down a rabbit hole. But the point I was making with house rules with like there's multiple like a ship. Like we using the example that Al gave, right? There's 8 or 9 different subsystems on a ship. If you mess up one house rule and then it comes back 2 hours later in the session and you're not consistent, right? With your house rules, because it's hard. I don't care like how good your memory is. It's hard to remember 10 subsystems, right? And the problem, what I like with house rules is the only thing I ask from a GM with house rules is if they're consistent.
well, that's my point though. My point is when I house rule something, it's normally written down. It's on a piece of paper or something, or like Al said, it's on my tablet. It's somewhere that I can see it and just remind myself so I don't make that mistake. And with Cypher, the beautiful thing is if you house rule it, if you do it right, you should not have to have 16 pages. It should be, it should be able to fit on a large index card.
Yeah, but we're not talking about what should. We're talking about this rule.
Yeah, so before
right, but I'm saying with this rule right here, and like Al said, right there in the book, it doesn't take up a lot of space.
So before
it's pretty extensive. Are you looking at
there's like 3 or 4 different charts. Like, but either way, before we move on, right? You're both making the right points right here. But what Anthony's really getting at is, if you're playing this sort of game in this genre and this specific, sci-fi space battle stuff, right, you're going to be house ruling a lot of stuff on the fly, and you're essentially going to be creating these charts as you go. So just having these, it's not bad, but again, you become a chart collection, which again, the game just provides you in this, which is really nice.
Yeah, and if you stop to write down every house rule, it breaks immersion. I am the guy that improvs everything. I write my games on the napkin. So I'm not arguing the improv. What I'm arguing is that I don't mind like improv in certain genres, right? But all I ask is consistency.
And I think that's where you and I differ, because any house rules I have, they're done before I sit down at my table. And everything else is improv. If I'm going to improv, I put down, because it's
so then you still writing a chart. That's the point.
Again, we're going down a rabbit hole here, guys. Let's move on to the next thing, which again we're discussing just the 2 different aspects from the Stars of Fire, and the second thing is something really cool. Who's reading that one?
I'll continue on with it. So this is the red line maneuver. When someone with access to a spacecraft controls attempts a particular audacious or risky maneuver, it's a red line maneuver. Essentially, declaring a red line maneuver eases one task a PC attempts in a spacecraft under duress, but comes with a oh my god, I forgot how to pronounce this. Concomitant risk. To make a red line maneuver, a character spends 1 XP as a free action. In doing so, they unlock the option for all PCs to attempt red line for the rest of the combat. To red line, a PC describes the dangerous thing that they want to attempt, then takes that action. Mechanically, the PC eases that particular task they are attempting, which might just be to fire at the enemy craft's weapons, but increases the GM intrusion range by 2 points. For instance, the PC spacecraft is fleeing several groupings of dagger fighters coordinating their action. Things seem grim. Tammy, the pilot, indicates she's going to try a red line maneuver. She pays her 1 XP, allowing her and any other PCs aboard to redline for the rest of the encounter. Then she describes her audacious scheme to accelerate directly into the swarm of fighters, as opposed to simply trying to get away, hoping to break up their coordination and maybe even causing a couple to crash in the process. Her task is eased even before applying any other modifier, such as her skill in piloting, any levels of effort, she wants to apply, and so on. But the GM intrusion range for her role is now 1 to 3 on a D20. A character who redlines could opt to increase their gamble by easing the task by 2 steps or even more. However, each step increases the GM intrusion range by another 2 points that round. Redline maneuvers are also available in desperate non-combat situations aboard a spacecraft. For example, Tammy's ship is caught in a decaying orbit over Venus, and the ship doesn't have enough power left to break out. She tells the GM that she's going to try an extremely risky maneuver that involves igniting all the remaining power at once, hoping that the explosive thrust will succeed in blowing the craft into a higher orbit. Because things are desperate, she commits to easing the task by 2 steps after applying 1 XP. This easing, plus any skill application of effort and so on, gives her a pretty decent chance of succeeding, except the GM intrusion range is now 1 to 5. If a GM intrusion is triggered, something goes wrong. Remember that success might still be possible if the roll was high enough, but still falls within the increased GM intrusion range. In this case, a complete success is turned into a qualified success, which means something bad also happens or the success isn't complete. For example, while Tammy might succeed in breaking out of orbit, the explosive thrust creates an onboard fire, resulting in the PCs aboard her ship taking some damage. If you're looking for inspiration for appropriate GM intrusions when redlining, PC's triggers one, refer to the suggested GM intrusions presented under Bridge Combat. Hereafter, each associated with a particular ship system that a character is probably crewing. After a round where a red line maneuver was attempted, the GM intrusion range returns to normal 1 on a 1d20 as the next round begins. Multiple red line maneuvers. Only one PC needs to spend XP to unlock red line maneuvers for themselves and for any other PC aboard the same spacecraft for the duration of a single encounter. Multiple red line attempts during the same round by 2 or more PCs additively increases the GM intrusion range for that round. So a PC attempting a red line maneuver who takes their turn after the previous red line attempt that round faces a GM intrusion range that is already inflated, which will inflate even more when they redline. PCs who do not redline during a particular round don't have to worry about the increasing GM intrusion range for their action. Thus, while PCs do not need to pre-announce their intention to redline at the beginning of each round, coordinating wouldn't be a bad idea. Whichever PC redlines last in a round where redline maneuvers were already attempted could face a fairly significant GM intrusion. For example, if the pilot redlines a defense task, the GM intrusion range increases to 1 to 3. If the gunner takes their turn next and also elects to redline and attack, the GM intrusion already at 1 to 3 expands to 1 to 5 on their attack, even though they're both attempting something unrelated. All that matters as far as the GM intrusion range expansion goes is that both are redlining during the same round. What are some of your favorite optional rules in the Stars of Fire?
He's on autopilot.
I'll go first. I absolutely love this design. It's like Bruce took a portion of the player intrusion mechanic and horror mode and married them together to make interesting scenes for group spaceship combat or just group spaceship life in general. You know, the concept of giving up a resource to make something cool happen, but at the same time, not only are you given the XP resource, which is only paid once, by the way, which is ingenious, and then raising the GM intrusion level every time you guys choose to do this is beautiful design. I've never used this, but I see this not only, you could run this on a lot of different genres, not just spaceship life. Like, remember we were talking about romantic comedy the other day? I think this will work in a romantic comedy game great. You get the girl or the guy that, you wanted to love you to actually happen, but now you add a complication in. You could utilize this in so many different ways. Really, I'm upset that I haven't used this rule before.
The red line maneuver is really, really cool. I mean, and you're right. You can use it anywhere. I mean, I love using it. Like I ran a spy game with like Jason Bourne, James Bond, and the Saint, and it was the same thing. They were trying to get away, and they were red line maneuvering to dive out of windows and all this kind of craziness. It was awesome. So you're right. It's a great rule. It's a lot of fun. Um,
I mean, just to break it down, what you're essentially doing, right, is you're spending 1 XP to give you assets on a role that you need to, succeed in. And the GM then gets to raise the target number of a GM intrusion. So not only does he get a GM intrusion on a 1, he's going to get a GM intrusion on a 2. And every player afterward,
Yeah, 3.
1 to 3.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Every player afterward that chooses to, give himself free assets to succeed on the roll is raising the GM intrusion number. It's
So
similar to horror mode.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's even cooler because horror mode only goes up by 1. This goes up by 2 every time somebody does it. So if 3 players do it, the GM is at 1 to 7.
Yeah, I mean, but the reason why is mechanically is because in horror mode you're not giving the players anything.
Oh, I know that. I understand that. I'm saying it's cool like that, and I like it because, I mean, you think about it. Even if a player reduces, just say the player reduces the difficulty down to, a 1, and they roll, reduce it to a 2, and they roll the 6, but you're at 1 to 7 by then. You still give intrusion. It's awesome.
Yeah, from a design perspective, I just love that this marries so. I mean, it works so well with the Cypher core philosophy of resource management. You're giving up you're giving up a resource, which is GM intrusions will be sort of like a resource. You're giving the GM, you're empowering the GM with some extra ability, to affect the narrative, but you're succeeding at the task at hand. So you have to decide whether, do I really want to use a red line to make sure that this one action is going to succeed? Because I might freaking pay for it.
And
go
ahead.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say one thing that I really like, and I'm glad it's specified, and I'm just gonna reiterate it because it's important. That if within once red line maneuvering is active, if you're taking an action on that round and you're not redlining, you still have a GM intrusion range of just the 1. That increased GM intrusion range is only for people attempting these outlandish, risky maneuvers. If you're still being conservative and taking your action at its base, difficulty, not easing it via the unlocked red line maneuvers, you're still GM intrusion at a 1. Your actions of the other players don't affect you if you don't want it to.
Right, as long as you're not trying to get that free asset.
Yeah, but my gut feeling is that once the Pandora's box opens, you're gonna get more players wanting to. Oh, freaking! I'm gonna try it because I mean that's how I would be. If you and Dean said, "Hey, I'm gonna start the red line maneuvers," I'm following suit. I'm the red line maneuver and everything.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean, you gotta, and it's like for the rest of the encounter.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't do it,
And again, it's important to note that the intrusion range does reset after the round. So once that round everybody goes and it's the next round, red line maneuvers are still active. You don't have to pay the XP to reactivate it for the next round, but the GM intrusion does reset down to 0. Oh, excuse me, to 1.
To 1 to 3.
No. If they would have to take the action to enable it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The red line maneuver. You said the red line maneuver resets to 1 to 3, but everybody else is still at a normal GM intrusion if they do normal.
So what I'm saying is on the next round after it's activated, right? It's already red line happened. It's already everybody took their turn. On the next round, red line maneuvers are still technically on, but you would have to choose to take it. If you don't choose to take it, the GM intrusion is just still a 1. It's not a pressure you have to keep pushing. On the next round, it can just go back to normal.
Right.
Just throwing that out there as an explanation.
I think we were saying the same thing. The red line maneuver itself is still 1 to 3. But
if you choose to take it, yes.
Right. But all other actions are still normal, So it's pretty cool.
I mean, this is a rule that I think that kind of bypassed initially when reading Stars of Fire, and I kind of regret it now.
Yeah, it's definitely really cool, and honestly, it's something we could probably include in literally every single game.
See, now,
Like quite literally.
I
see,
mean, it's
now what this makes me want to
perfect.
do. This makes me want to run. This makes me want to run something where, you know, either everybody's like fighter pilots or, somebody, you guys are on a spaceship or something, and just like do some crazy space combat stuff. It's a lot of fun.
I mean, it's tailor made for it's tailor made for dogfight scenes, Top Gun style games. You know, it's tailor
Star
made for
Wars.
mech games
Yep.
where everyone's like I could see this working for Voltron.
Oh yeah.
Power Rangers.
I wanted to do a Voltron game for the longest time.
I
Like,
mean, and you could really have fun with this with a Power Rangers game. Like when they form the Megazord,
yeah,
everybody's got a system.
It becomes bridge combat instead of
Yeah.
single. Like
Yeah.
it's a very interesting way to just mesh all these optional rules together.
So yeah,
that's the third optional rule that we didn't really touch on was bridge combat.
I mean,
It's basically you want to do Star Wars. I mean, you want to do Star Trek.
right. Star Trek would be bridge combat.
I mean, we basically kind of touched on it with the little charts and stuff. Like, the charts also include those substations for the bridge combat scenario. Whether it be, like, again, a big, Star Trek ship or a mech that's combined into, like, a Megazord type deal. Then it becomes a bridge, and each, character controls a section of the ship or whatever have you. And again, it's wonderfully done.
Oh, yo, Dean, remember what we were talking about earlier? I just saw the reference. They tell you in the sidebar is to make a copy, 1 or 2 page
Yep.
combat status tracker, and have them for the players and you to see.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I would do is just put them all like on those, put them all on one sheet, and pass them around the table, and then it's there, or something, But because it's cool as hell. I mean, it makes life real easy.
Oh, hold on. This is one vehicle combat thing that we didn't touch on, and I really think we should because I'll read it out. But vehicles fighting creatures. This actually, we weren't planning. We weren't planning to talk about this, but I think we should because this comes up a lot, and it's a little confusing, and it's a little it gets a lot of hate on the server because people don't like it so much. So I'm just going to read it so we could chat about it.
Okay.
What page is it on at?
It's on page 49 of the PDF or Stars of Fire.
So that page 47 in the actual book.
No, it's 49 on the actual. I mean 49. It's 47 in the book, but 49 on the PDF. Yeah. You guys ready?
Yeah.
You got it? Okay. Vehicles fighting creatures. The PCs are blazing across the solar system towards the Neptune moon to make a rendezvous. As they arrive, they encounter a colossal vacuum-adapted creature called Warn Interceptor. Warns are mysterious and standoffish, other times aggressive for no obvious reasons humans can grok. The PCs decide to give the celestial beast a wide berth, but it does no good. The gargantuan thing attacks. Spacecraft versus colossal creatures. Basically, ship versus kaiju, right? If a creature is as capable as a spacecraft, treat it that way when it comes to vehicle combat. Instead of adjusting for mismatched tech rating, treat the creature's effective level as 3 levels less than its actual level. Extrapolate weapon systems to the creature's attack methods, defense to its weird organic plating, and so on. Killing such a creature means taking out its power core or other vital spots. And then it goes into spacecraft versus regular creatures. If a vehicle's weapon system fires on an unprotected PC, or a PC and a spacecraft fires ship weapons on a creature outside the craft that isn't colossal, it's an extremely different situation. Attacks against a vehicle's systems face all the previously mentioned modifiers. On top of that, add an additional 5 steps of hindrance Why even bother to roll if you have to do this? But okay. 5 steps are hindrance to attacks by a regular creature against a space or starcraft. For example, a PC on the surface of the planet is being strafed by a level 3 spacecraft. The PC attempts to take out the spacecraft's weapons. 2-step hindrance as it goes by. The mixed match further hinders the task by 5 more steps, effectively making a difficulty task 10. Of course, if the PC uses effort, training, and other abilities, it still might be possible to succeed. Likewise, a PC defending from a spacecraft attack is hindered by 5 steps, except in this case, the spacecraft inflicts damage. Given that the ship's weapons compared to handheld weapons are an order of magnitude apart when it comes to power, a good rule of thumb is that a spacecraft's weapon inflicts 25 points of damage on a successful hit and knocks the character 1 step on the damage track. Even if the character succeeds on their defense roll, they still take 5 points of damage. Essentially, PCs without a spacecraft on their own should not run from such a fight, unless they manage to benefit from post-human upgrades, which will help even on the field. All right, we'll do the second part first, because I think this was all to do for nothing. Because like I prefer like the old Rifts method. Like spaceships did mega damage, normal people did SDC damage, and they didn't mesh. So 1 point of mega damage was killing somebody with SDC damage. So why bother to roll? Like if it hits you, it's gonna kill you. You know, a man with no armor getting shot by there's no way you survive in a close range F-16, missile shot. Like what? You're blown to pieces. Like
but again, we're talking about a Cypher system, and we're talking about cinematic action. Like we've seen Rambo shoot down an Apache helicopter, because he's got a law rocket, and they're standing there shooting, and for some reason they miss him. So it's all those factors.
I'm not talking, Dean. I'm not talking about the option to roll to not get hit. I'm talking about once you get hit. Oh, yeah, why are you taking 5 points of damage? Like even if you're dead, why are we even bothering with that?
Well, no, I said if you don't get hit, you take 5 points of damage. If you get hit, of course you're dead. 25 points of damage. If this is a tier 2 to tier, tier 3, really, you're gonna deplete 9 times out of 10. You're depleting, their strength pool, their might pool. It's done, and you're being knocked down the damage track. So, again, that's those movies where you see the guy get his leg blown off.
No, I understand you justifying. What I'm saying is it isn't necessary.
Honestly, you're like right, but I can see where Dean is coming from, right? So players in this game would want to feel like, they can do something this outrageous, even if it's very difficult to do it, right? And again, it's nice for people who can't really, because honestly, what you're saying is true. Like you ruled it a certain way because of your background with Rifts. Some maybe say newer GM maybe wouldn't know how to like even it out. Like they don't want to like just say the PC dies from getting shot, so they have this thing to fall back on.
Oh yeah, Kazarek, I'm not talking about supers or anything with power shifts. I'm just talking about regular Joe Schmo standing in front of M16 that unloads.
You're absolutely right, Anthony. But again, the other side of that coin is we're not talking about trying to be realistic per se. We're literally just talking about it in the terms of a cinematic role-playing game. How many movies have you watched where the guy gets strafed and he took all this damage, and then the next scene they show him roll over on the side with the law rocket, boom, or he spins around and he shoots the pilot. Now he's all messed up. He took the 25 points of damage. So I'm just saying it in the sense of being cinematic. I get what you're saying, but we're talking about the RPG that's supposed to be cinematic in nature, and we're also talking about the fact that we're letting our players be heroic and be the center of the story. So yeah, I would do the 25 points of damage to you, you know. And if it's 25 points and you got 12 might and 13, you know, what's the name? Guess what? You have no speed and you have no might left, and you drop 2 levels down on the damage track. Boom,
And
that's it.
I would say that's not enough.
I
Even
know
if you, even if
but
you're
I'm just
doing a
saying.
cinematic movie, it just,
But I'm just saying, I'm
you could
sorry
be
though.
cinematic, and then you could be just this is
Dude.
total BS.
Dude,
You know?
Before we get
how
caught
many-
up, guys,
How
before,
many movies have you watched with the total BS?
I've never seen a movie, like, Dean, I've never seen a movie where a dude gets shot point blank from a spaceship.
and lives. But either way though,
And even in the anime, they kill the. We're not talking about supers movies. Even in the anime, they kill those random dudes.
Yeah, we ain't talking about random dudes. The hero is somebody super.
It says specifically, dude, regular creatures. I'm
guys,
not talking
before again we get all caught up here, right? So again, if it's the PCs that are being attacked or whatever have you, I can see why you give them that cinematic, you know, whatever have you, right? But
That's all
like
I'm
Anthony
talking
is
about
saying,
PC.
if it's just an NPC that's being fired on, yeah, it could just blow them up. Why even
I'm
have
not talking about
all that?
NPCs. I'm talking about player characters.
I'm just trying to clarify here. But either way, the rules presented in Stars of Fire are really cool. If you haven't picked it up, definitely pick it up, check it out.
We didn't do the Colossus, the Kaiju rule.
Oh yeah, but that one, I'll touch on that one real quick.
Yeah,
So for that one, right, it basically just states you just treat it as if it was a starship. It has the same qualities, capabilities, whatever. It's big. It'll have the same sort of like subsystems, quote unquote, that you attack, but you flavor them differently. Like their shields might be armor plated, or excuse me, scale plating. Their laser might just be a fire breath, something like that.
But there's a sentence here, Al, that a lot of people hate, and it says the creature's affected level is 3 levels less than its actual level.
What?
That's the one that everybody hates, because they saying, hey, if I have a level 10 dragon, right, and he's fighting a level 3 spaceship, they're like, why does it have to drop 3 levels?
It's easier. Basically, in this, it's the same argument that I was making before. When I said what I used to do, what I was doing with my regular games, bigger things are easier to hit. Okay, so it's easier to hit it, but guess what? Its armor and all of its other abilities are still effectively level 10.
Yeah, but you don't, Dean, you always go straight to size. The level doesn't necessarily mean the size.
It's a big thing, yeah.
You know, this is specifically
the overall power of the thing.
This is specifically talking about size. Colossal creature versus vehicles. Specifically.
Yeah,
but okay, let me just, because it sounds like we're going to start an argument here. So,
no, hold on. I'm just going to, me and Dean are not arguing. We're not going to bust into a fist fight. This is how we talk. We're New Yorkers.
So go ahead.
But the level doesn't necessarily. So you're gonna tell me that there's 2 colossal creatures, right? The one's a level 9 and one's a level 10. The 10 is always bigger than the level 9. You understand what I mean?
They're speaking about ships versus colossal creatures. So that's specifically referring to size. And I'm thinking that that's specifically because what you were saying earlier about the level fluctuations, and you're right. Like, for example, if I had a White Star versus the Millennium Falcon, the White Star will probably be a higher level ship, even though it's the same size as the Millennium Falcon. You're absolutely right. But in this case, this is specifically making reference to the size of the creature being colossal. And I'm thinking that's why they're saying it's easier to hit, because the creature is massive, but all of its other abilities are still level 10. That's all I'm saying.
Because you think about it, kaiju, right? And we're going to do the cinematic thing that you're saying. How many times in a kaiju of anime you see a kaiju's fighting multiple airplanes or a kaiju's fighting. So why is it weakened because it's fighting an airplane?
It's not weakened. It's easier for you to hit it. Nothing about the kaiju is weakened. Its abilities are still level 10. The only thing that's easier is it's easier to hit it. It says it's considered 3 levels lower. Everything else is still level 10.
No, it says its effective level is treated as 3 levels less. So that means it's. I mean, we have a different interpretation of what effective level means.
Well, the only thing I would make it 3 levels lower would be for to hit it. That's all I'm saying. Everything else would still be level 10. Because if it's a level 10 monster, that I don't see its weapons being any less effective, its armor being any less effective. I only see it being easier to be hit. That's it.
Me personally, I never used this rule, but I understand the confusion why people don't like this rule.
Oh yeah, I do too. I can see why.
I
can see why. And if you were, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Al. I'm just looking at it again, and you're right. It does say effective level. And see, I wouldn't do it that way. I would only say its defense is 3 levels lower. For me, at least for me, because I'm looking at it, when you see them shoot Godzilla with, how many planes they shoot, they don't miss, but they don't really do a lot of damage. Their damage is ineffectual because his armor, so that's the way I handle that.
I think that when people see effective level, though, they think it's a level 10 creature drops down to a level 7 creature when.
Yes. And I can see that. I can see that misconception as well. So
you want to say something, Mal?
No, just that I would play it as if it was just a regular ship. I don't see the reason or need to even modify it in any way. Just play it as if it was a normal ship. Unless, again, there's certain situations or circumstances that would modify it. Like, again, it's a tiny, very strong creature or something like that. Because, again, size will come into factor. Or if it's a very, very large or whatever. But, again, I would just... If it's just this kaiju and it's nothing special about this kaiju in this kaiju setting we're playing it, I would just play it as a regular spaceship. I wouldn't even bother modifying it with those -3 or whatever have you. But that's just me.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that like I've never actually ran this, so I don't know if it works at the table, so I can't really discuss that. But I know that on the server, when people talk about this rule, they see the effective level, 3 levels lower. It makes people angry.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, I can see how it would piss somebody off. I mean, it's an organic creature, but it's your big monster, but it's only. Why would it only be level 7?
Yeah.
Yeah,
to be honest with you, everything else works the same. It's basically, and I can see your point that make it 3 levels easier to hit because of its size, which makes perfect sense. But yeah, I just keep everything else as is, including its hit points, including its armor rating, including the damage it does.
Yeah. All of that. I mean, all of that, unless you had some way to, justify something doing less damage. But I really don't see that, being a necessity. Like the last time I ran, even I'll give you a prime example. I ran a fantasy game not too long ago, and I had them fighting a dragon, but they had a spelljammer, like a spelljammer type ship, and they had ballista, and they were shooting at the dragon, and it was easier for them to hit him. They had bonuses to hit, but his armor plating was deflecting the shots. You know what I'm saying? It was cool like that. Then just little things you can add in. You can add a blade of armor if you want it because it's an organic creature. You can say that you pounding and pounding and pounding, and you're wearing its armor down.
Kazarak, that's the perfect example. You could just do that method, which is basically just just redesign the kaijus as vehicles.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, and use the vehicle rules. That probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff there, guys. I mean, and again, because it's Cypher system, and modular, you plug and play. You use the parts of it you like and discard the rest, or you modify it, and it doesn't take a lot to modify a rule, and it still really be the same rule. It feels right. If it feels right at your table and it's fun, then there's nothing wrong with, doing it the way, however you decide to do it.
And I
So
and I know was busting chops on these vehicle versus creature rules, but to be honest, that it's not like the end all be all either way. You know what I mean? If you ran it this way, or you just, I would put, this is the perfect thing that I would just improv at the table with not.
well, yeah, I mean,
I mean,
exactly. And like you said, and again, people, we really want everybody to understand. Anthony and I were not arguing. We're just a couple of crazy New Yorkers who go back and forth. That's my brother. Love that dude over there. And I was just saying it from the perspective of it being PCs. I want people to understand that
People
for
that watch our videos expect us to argue. That's what we do.
but it's the PC. It was the PC. I was not saying about NPCs or other people. Yeah, everybody, because I mean, how many movies have you watched and they
Yeah.
strafe through the village and they kill everybody? There's bodies laying everywhere, but the hero is like, "Ha, you missed me,"
Yeah.
or it's a flesh wound.
I mean, like, I just wouldn't think, maybe because I'm just thinking in my own head, like the way I would run a game. I wouldn't think that I need to be like, oh, you got shot, you're going to take 25 points of that. Like, I don't think I need to put a number behind what, like, like I was thinking, like, this at this close range, it's going to kill you, dude. Like, let's start, it's like hitting a fly, shooting a fly with a gun.
With a
You know what I
357 Magnum, I get it. No, trust me, I get it. Look, there's no conceivable way. I was in the military.
mean?
I know what a 50 cal will do to a body. So let alone talking about a 20 millimeter cannon,
Yeah.
on the side of a warthog, or you fly in with, you trust me, a large energy weapon, you're shooting pulse cannons. I get it. But I'm saying for purposes of the game and the fact that you're a PC, I mean, I'm going to give you some option, some way to survive. That's all I'm saying, and I get it. I get it,
Yeah, I got 3 letters for you. TPK.
He's an ass. You okay, Al?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say about the topic. Quite honestly, I haven't run it much. You guys are hitting the points I would have hit.
Uh, exactly. But that's what I'm saying, man. It's just pretty cool. It's all fun. It's all fun. And I think that's what it's about. It's all about the fun. You handle it the way you see fit. I mean, of course, I mean, we've seen in those other movies. I mean, come on, just recently we saw in in the last Star Wars movie, we literally saw a person take out a fighter because Rey smacked what's the name ship right out of the air with her lightsaber. What the fuck? So
Yeah, I will say this. We didn't really give Gonza Gaming's Cruel Stars justice. So maybe we'll get Gonza on to talk about, continue the ship combat rules and have Gonza come on and actually talk about the rules he implemented because they are really cool. I mean,
Right.
I know we mentioned it in passing, but we'll call Chris about getting him on here to break down his rules because he did some really cool and innovative stuff too. And if you haven't checked it out, check out Cool Stalls on Drive Through RPG. It's a great supplement worth having.
Yeah, probably be a good idea. We'll expand upon this because, it seemed like I say, Grayson, you did ask about this, man. Another shout out. Thanks for giving us a good topic to talk about. And we'll do our best. And everybody out there who's watching, if you're on our server, if you're not on our server, even if you just see us on YouTube, feel free to drop a suggestion if there's some questions you want us to talk about, some rules, concepts, whatever, there's a type of show you want us to do, let us know because this is what we're here for. This is what we like to do.
Is there any, before we cut off and sign off on this, I just want to ask you guys, are there any house rules you rather use over the MCG or raw rules?
Well, I don't think I'm going to stop using, I think I'm just going to integrate what we talked about today into my, my systems rule that I have for ships. Because because I designed a bunch of different kind of ships. Now, if I ever just start playing a generic game, I'll probably just use the rules as written. But like for my Star Wars game and for, and it's not really Star Wars, it's my version. It's not, supposed to be Star Wars, but for that game, and for another space opera game that I want to run, which is more hardline sci-fi, I'll probably still design ships and have the systems built into the ships. So that's the only thing I'm going to continue to use. That's because I like it. I like the way it works, and it helps the players see it, see the combat rules a little better, a little easier, at least in my experience.
How about you, Al?
I would probably just run this rules as written now. Before Stars of Fire came out, before revised Cypher book came out, I honestly forget how the vehicle combat etc was detailed in the original book. But either way, around that time, I was thinking about Power Rangers and whatnot. And, we played a little bit, and I wrote a bunch of shit about it. But now that Stars of Fire are out and the revised core book are out, I feel like those rules are pretty spot on. Like, they do their job well. They account for differences in, like, ship tech and whatnot. They provide you with different subsystems that you can reflavor should you decide to run a different setting other than sci-fi or, the setting provided within Stars of Fire. The only thing is, like you, I might, instead of using that, if a ship is attacking a creature or something, I probably would just have them die, honestly, like, or, having the 25 damage, again, makes sense if you need something to fall back to, if you're a newer GM, you don't know really how to, work the situation, but me as a GM, I would probably just have, if the PC is stupid enough to put themselves in the line of fire of this giant, ship that could kill them, that's on them. Like, they might get missed, they might miss, the ship might miss them, and they'll have that heroic moment, but should they get hit, it's gonna be a bad time.
You guys are mean.
I don't see, again, I can see the PC wanting to go down and like a blaze of glory towards the end of a one-shot, because again, my most big thing is one-shots, and I can see that happening at the end of a one-shot, no problem. And again, since it is a one-shot, my specialty or what I normally run are one-shots, that's probably why I would default to just straight up killing them as opposed to doing 25 damage.
Well, see, like I said, if it's a PC, and I'll put that caveat. If it's a PC, I'm probably going to do 25 damage, dropping you down on the damage track, so on and so forth. NPCs, 99.999% of the time are going to be dead. That that 0.0001% would probably be if it's a reoccurring NPC in a campaign that I just don't want to die. I'll have him come back, as a cyborg or something, but I'm with you guys. I get it. Trust me, I get it. I'm just, for the story. It's for the craziness of the story that I would do stuff like that.
He said I would have him come back as a cyborg. That's hilarious.
Zombie.
I mean, I also want to mention that if you don't own Stars of Fire, you should do. The vehicle list of Stars of Fire is actually pretty good. And we've also failed to mention this as well. You should check out Vert RPG by Raven Desk Games as well, because they have probably the most extensive vehicle list.
Vehicle and equipment list. Vehicle and equipment list.
System books.
Yeah, their vehicle and equipment list is great. It's awesome. Seriously, no complaints there.
Yeah, so between Stars of Fire and Vert, you pretty much have all the vehicles you could, possibly use. And if there is something that isn't in those books, you could just reflavor something that is in those books to fit what you want.
And that's kind of what I did. I used those books and Cruel Stars to create all my ships in my Rebel game. Which is pretty cool because I based it off of the strangest Rebel recursion, and created my own Star Wars, if you will. My own space opera, and it's pretty cool. It worked out pretty nicely. So yeah. Uh,
So if you like Cypher Unlimited and you like what we do, go to our YouTube channel and like, share, subscribe there. We really appreciate. We're trying to get our view count up there. Leave a comment on our videos. Tell us we're assholes. Tell us you hate us. As long as you leave in a comment, we don't care. We'll reply to you anyway. Or follow us on Twitch. Give us a follow. Subscribe if you can. If you can't, we still love you. Go to our online store and pick up all this cool Cypher Unlimited merch that me and Dean got on, hats, mugs, T-shirts, be the cool kid on the block, Cypher Unlimited gear, or give us a little donation on Ko-fi. Our videos always be free, but every little bit helps with stuff like Zoom course. Join our Facebook group. We have a couple hundred people there chatting all things Monte Cook games. And last but not least, join the Cypher Unlimited Discord. We have the largest fan-run Discord out there that's all about Monte Cook games. We have games being played daily there. We discuss every setting and genre, every game Monte Cook games make. So if you like Invisible Sun, you like No Thank You Evil, you like Numenera, The Stranger, or any of the other wonderful settings, that's the place to be. There's almost 4,000 people there chatting about MCG products daily. So, and plus the three of us are there. You can always message us there and we'll reply to you instantly. We love chatting with everybody about MCG. So stop by there. And finally, last but not least, we love you guys.
Dean, any last words?
only thing I just, I'll just echo Anthony. Join us. Talk to us. Like I said, one of our members, hit me up last week and asked me about, doing a show on this topic. We love feedback from our people on the server. We love feedback from people on Facebook. We love to discuss RPGs, specifically Monte Cook game stuff. We're real fanboys of it, and but at the same time, we also can take constructive, hard criticism. We like that too. Like Anthony said, if you want to tell us we're a bunch of asses, okay, we'll take that, and we'll try to do better. So.
And if you want to argue with us, we can do that too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
We'll do it with a smile.
Thank you guys so much for stopping by. Everybody who chatted with us. Thank you everybody who's watching this on YouTube. And yeah, as usual, from us at the CU, we will see you later.